We're opening the case file on what is arguably the most infamous digital ghost story of our time. This explainer isn't about a hardened criminal or some high-risk drifter. We are taking a meticulous, cold, hard look at an open investigation. It's a mystery that completely defies logic, ignores borders, and leaves us with nothing but raw facts and haunting questions. We're digging into the vanishing of Lars Mittank. We'll deconstruct the timeline, analyze the psychological motives, and examine the unverified evidence. We're going to start right at the chilling climax of this timeline. It's the morning of July 8, 2014. We're inside a medical office at Varna Airport in Bulgaria. A 28-year-old German tourist stands up in a sudden, blinding panic, and he screams these exact words, "I don't want to die here. I have to get out of here." And with that, he violently breaks away from the safety of a crowded international travel hub. He doesn't stop to explain. He doesn't ask a single person for help. He just runs. Security cameras catch this blur of a yellow t-shirt sprinting away from civilization into the blistering Bulgarian sun. When Lars sprinted out of that room, he didn't just leave a building. He left behind every single physical tie to his identity and his actual life. His backpack, his wallet, his mobile phone, and crucially, his passport, all completely abandoned. Now think about that for a second. What kind of sheer, paralyzing terror would it take for you to drop your passport, phone, and wallet in a foreign country and just bolt? In the world of missing persons cases, a discarded passport is a massive, glowing red flag. It tells investigators right away, this wasn't a calculated choice to start a new life. This was a raw, primal flight response. He vanished without a trace, carrying absolutely nothing but the clothes on his back. Part 1. The Victim. A Grounded Life. To really grasp the gravity of that manic sprint, we have to establish a stark contrast. We have to look at who Lars was before the mystery. The facts paint a picture of a remarkably stable life. We're talking about a 28-year-old precision mechanic working at a power plant in Wilhelmshaven, Germany, a normal, responsible citizen. He had a girlfriend waiting for him back home. After his dad suffered a stroke in 2012, Lars was the kind of guy who routinely traveled back to his hometown just to help his mom, Sandra, around the house. He was athletic, watched what he ate, a huge fan of the Werder Bremen football club, and this is vital. Investigators confirmed absolutely zero history of mental illness. This wasn't a troubled guy prone to erratic behavior. He was simply taking a last-minute summer holiday with 5 friends to the Golden Sands Resort in Bulgaria. It's a spot known for cheap drinks and wild nightlife, but Lars, he was eating small salads, avoiding heavy drinking, remained his cautious self, right up until something changed.
Part 2. The Catalyst at Golden Sands.
Let's methodically trace the timeline. On the night of July 5th, Lars and his friends are at a local bar watching the FIFA World Cup. A stupid, trivial argument breaks out over football flags. Lars gets into a verbal altercation with fans of a rival team, Bayern Munich. It gets resolved without violence. But then, at 4 a.m., his friends stop at a McDonald's and Lars decides to walk back to the hotel alone. What actually happened in the dark on that walk remains one of this case's greatest blind spots. He later claimed he was jumped by 4 men, hired, he believed, by those rival fans from the bar. No witnesses, no CCTV of the attack, but the physical damage, that was very real. A doctor diagnoses an injured jaw and a ruptured eardrum. Because of the cabin pressure risks with that ear injury, he cannot fly. So, on July 7th, his friends board a plane back to Germany, and Lars is left entirely alone in a foreign country. This is where we have to introduce a critical and highly controversial variable. The local doctor prescribes Lars an antibiotic, Ceprazil 500 milligram tablets. Now, objectively speaking, looking at the medical literature, cephalosporin antibiotics can, in very rare cases, induce severe psychotic side effects. We're talking acute anxiety, extreme paranoia, hallucinations. So investigators are faced with a massive question. Did a simple, everyday prescription trigger a devastating psychological descent? Or, as the airport doctor later claimed, did Lars become so paranoid he refused to even take the medication? We're left staring at a chemical variable with absolutely no definitive proof of ingestion.
Part 3. The Descent. Hotel Color Varna.
So, his friends are gone, he's clutching a bottle of antibiotics. Lars begins his final, solitary 24 hours. He checks into Hotel Color Varna, which is a cheap accommodation in a pretty rundown, shady district of the city. And it's inside this cheap room that the paranoia just fully wraps its hands around him. Late that night, he makes a series of terrifying whispered phone calls to his mom, Sandra, back in Germany. His heart is pounding. He tells her 4 men are hunting him. He's utterly convinced the hotel receptionist is involved in cloning his credit card, and he begs his mother to contact the bank and completely block his cards, permanently severing his financial lifeline. In the early hours of the morning, his voice is literally trembling, and he says, "Mom, I don't know whether I should live or die." He tells her he's hiding somewhere high up to avoid his pursuers. The terror we hear described in those calls is absolute. Now we need to separate the raw facts from the internet fiction regarding that night. It's absolutely crucial. You'll see rumors online that hotel cameras caught Lars hiding in elevators, pacing the hallways. But investigators, including a private detective hired by the family, totally debunked this. The hotel color didn't even have operational CCTV at the time. The receptionist's testimony simply states Lars stayed in his room, highly agitated. The hard facts show he checked in at 10:10 p.m., made those panicked calls to his mom, and then mysteriously left the hotel for an hour between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. Where he went in the dark during that lost hour? Completely unknown. By 5 a.m., utterly consumed by fear, he orders a taxi to Varna Airport. Part 4. The Airport Anomaly. He gets to the airport at 6 a.m. and calls his mom one last time. He asks her to wire him 500 euros via Western Union, supposedly following instructions he got from some mysterious Bavarian man he met at the terminal. Sandra wires the money, but Lars never collects it. And here is where we hit a deeply disturbing gap in the investigation. Despite Varna being a modern international airport, there is zero CCTV footage of Lars from the moment he arrives at 6 a.m. until he walks into the airport doctor's office at 9 a.m. Private investigators and forensic experts have repeatedly questioned this. Was this crucial 3-hour window of evidence deliberately wiped by airport authorities, or was it just gross negligence? Think about how travel works today. You're on camera the second you pull up to the curb. But here, a total blackout until 9 a.m. Part 5, 42 minutes in the medical office. Let's meticulously deconstruct those final moments right before the panic. At 9 a.m., Lars walks into Dr. Kostov's office. Kostov examines him, definitely notes his erratic, nervous behavior, but ultimately clears him to fly, sliding a waiver across the desk for him to sign. Lars is hyper-suspicious of the medication, suspicious of the doctor's reassurances. For 42 agonizing minutes, this tension just builds in that small room. Then, at 9:42 a.m., a third man opens the door and walks in. Officially, authorities say it was an unidentified construction worker, since the airport was undergoing some renovations. But listen to this. Dr. Kostov's own testimony about who this third man was actually changed multiple times during police questioning. It completely muddied the waters. Whatever Lars saw or thought he saw in that construction worker, it was the final trigger. He stood up, screamed, and ran for his life. Part 6. Into the sunflowers. He sprints out of the terminal, and he completely bypasses police cars, ignores bus stops where he easily could have screamed for help. Instead, he reaches the edge of the airport grounds and effortlessly scales a 2-meter-tall barbed wire perimeter fence. We have to correct a massive myth here. The internet loves to claim he vanished into some dark, impenetrable, creeping forest. That's just false. The geographical fact is, he dropped down from that fence into a wide-open, 6-foot-high sunflower field right bordering the heavily trafficked A2 motorway. Bulgarian authorities eventually brought in tracking dogs. The canines followed his scent straight through those sunflowers, right up to the edge of the asphalt on the highway. And right there, the trail went dead. Part 7. Deconstructing the theories. It's been over a decade, and we have to put our investigative hats on and weigh the leading theories of this cold case. How exactly does a healthy, athletic 28-year-old just evaporate in broad daylight? Let's compare the two medical triggers. On one hand, we have physical trauma. Did that unverified beating in the dark on July 6th cause a slow brain bleed? A subdural hematoma can absolutely cause sudden confusion, erratic behavior, and intense paranoia days after the initial blow. On the flip side, we have chemical psychosis. Did that cefprozol antibiotic trigger an acute psychotic break? The brutal irony here is, if Dr. Kostov was right, Lars never even took the pills, which means he was either running from a chemical reaction he hadn't fully ingested or a fatal head injury he refused to let anyone properly treat. But we can't ignore the foul play theory. What if Lars was telling the exact truth? Was that petty argument over football flags the start of a very real, very deadly criminal threat? Did he manage to anger the wrong locals who decided to hunt him all the way to the airport terminal? Private investigator Andreas Gutig spent years digging into the Bulgarian underworld looking for this. He found absolutely zero hard evidence of a criminal conspiracy, no human trafficking ring, no hit squad. But to Lars, the threat was completely undeniably real. He was running from something. Part 8. A Ghost on the Highway. The search operation that followed was massive. The private investigator deployed thermal imaging drones, tracking dogs, and had over 100 volunteers combing through the rural fields and abandoned warehouses all around Varna. They found nothing. As the years bleed by, the unconfirmed sightings just trickle in. In 2015, there were reports of a Bulgarian transient identifying as Lars, mumbling about living in a large hotel that didn't actually exist. In 2019, a German truck driver called in claiming he picked up a deeply disheveled hitchhiker with weary eyes near Berlin, a man who strongly resembled an older Lars. But every single lead has fallen apart. None have been verified. To this day, not one shred of clothing, not a single bone, no physical remains whatsoever have ever been pulled from those fields in Bulgaria.
So we're left staring at a grainy 10-year-old video of a young man sprinting for his life. You've walked through the timeline with us. You've analyzed the descent. I'll leave you with this final, lingering question. As Lars Mittank tore through those Bulgarian sunflowers, was he escaping a real breathing killer, or was he desperately fleeing a phantom born entirely in his own fracturing mind? Either way, he ran straight into the void, and he never came out.